Professor Zelak looked at his datapad with the kind of expression most sentients reserved for finding something unpleasant stuck to their foot. His 4 yellow eyes blinked in sequence as he read the field exercise report for the 3rd time, each blink somehow conveying more bewilderment than the last. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to his teaching assistant Vrex, who was currently trying to blend into the metallic wall of their observation shuttle. "I assigned a simple survival exercise. Secure a campsite for 3 days, basic wilderness protocols, and somehow," he gestured at the surveillance footage playing on the main screen, "somehow Marcus built what appears to be a military fortification." On screen, the human in question was methodically pounding wooden stakes into the ground with a rock he'd somehow fashioned into a hammer. Around him, a perimeter of sharpened logs formed what could only be described as a palisade. Beyond that, carefully arranged pit traps dotted the landscape in a pattern that would make a defensive strategist weep with joy. "Well," Vrex ventured, his voice carrying the tone of someone desperately hoping not to be asked follow-up questions, "the assignment did say to secure the camp." "It said secure the camp, not establish a forward operating base." Zelak's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Look at this. He's got watchtowers, made from trees he apparently felled with his bare hands." The footage switched to another angle, showing Marcus directing his fellow students in what appeared to be military-grade defensive positions. A Thraxian named Kel was crouched behind a log barricade, looking confused but oddly excited. Nearby, Zira the Vorthon was practicing what could only be described as combat roles, having apparently been infected by whatever madness had seized the human. "Oh, and don't even get me started on the patrol schedules," Zelak continued, scrolling through more data. "He's divided the other students into shifts, complete with hand signals, rally points, and what he calls overlapping fields of fire." "What does that even mean?" Vrex consulted his own tablet. According to the glossary the human provided, and yes, he made a glossary, it refers to positioning defensive elements so that their effective ranges complement each other, ensuring no approach vector remains undefended. There was a long pause. Zelak's eyes all focused on his assistant. He made a glossary, a comprehensive one, with diagrams. "Of course he did." The professor rubbed his temples with 2 of his tentacles. "What are the other students doing while Marcus transforms their wilderness exercise into the siege of Thermopylae?" The screen split to show multiple camera angles. Most of the non-human students had adopted a sort of bewildered compliance, following Marcus's increasingly elaborate instructions with the dedication of civilians who'd suddenly found themselves conscripted into an army they didn't remember joining. "Well," Vrex reported, "Yathin the Christek appears to be constructing some kind of early warning system using resonant crystal formations. Quite ingenious, actually. Any vibrations in a 50-meter radius will create harmonic frequencies that can be heard throughout the camp. I don't want to know where he learned to do that. Court has been assigned to what Marcus calls supply management. He's organized their rations, water, and equipment with military precision, color-coded categories, inventory tracking, the works." Zelak looked at the footage of the small, furry court arranging supply caches with the focused intensity of a logistics officer. "That actually sounds useful. The twins, Hex and Dex, have been designated as mobile reconnaissance. They're currently mapping every game trail, water source, and potential hostile approach within a 2-kilometer radius." "Potential hostile approach?" "It's a class exercise on a nature preserve. The most dangerous thing out there is a fruit bat. You might want to tell Marcus that," Vrex said quietly, pointing to the screen. The human was now instructing Nala, a particularly nervous Zephyrian, on what he called noise discipline. The poor creature looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy, but she was dutifully practicing the hand signals Marcus had apparently invented for their operation. "This is insane," Zelak muttered. "I've been teaching survival courses for 30 years. Students usually set up a basic shelter, maybe organize their supplies, and spend 3 days complaining about the food. They don't establish tactical supremacy over the local ecosystem. The communication system crackled to life. Base Camp Alpha to control. Base Camp Alpha to control. Over. Zelak and Vrex exchanged glances. Did he just try to radio us? Base Camp Alpha to control. Requesting sitrep on extraction timeline. Have established secure perimeter and am ready to begin Phase 2 operations. Over. With trembling tentacles, Zelak activated the comm. Marcus, this is Professor Zelak. What exactly do you mean by Phase 2 operations? Oh, hey, Professor. Great to hear from you. We've got the defensive perimeter locked down tight, so I was thinking we could start working on some aggressive patrolling. Maybe establish a few forward observation posts. Really extend our security bubble, you know? Marcus, Zelak tried to keep his voice calm. This is a survival exercise. You were supposed to set up camp and wait for pickup. Right, exactly. Secure the camp. But see, the thing is, you can't really secure a position without understanding the tactical situation in the surrounding area. So I figured we'd start with a defensive perimeter, which is done, and then move on to area denial and reconnaissance in force. Vrex was frantically taking notes. Should I be writing this down? Oh, and Professor? We're going to need a resupply drop. I've calculated our defensive stores against probable consumption rates. And if we're going to hold this position for an extended period, we're going to need more MRES. Also, maybe some wire for improved obstacle construction. You want me to airdrop military supplies to a class exercise? Well, not military supplies, exactly. I mean, we're making do with what we have, but if this were a real situation, we'd want proper materiel. The improvised explosive devices I've been working on are functional, but they lack stopping power. The silence that followed was so complete that Vrex later swore he could hear his own circulatory system working. I'm sorry, Zelak said finally. Did you say explosive devices? Just small ones. Mostly noisemakers, really. Though I did figure out how to make some decent flashbangs using local materials. Want to see? No! Zelak practically shouted. No, I do not want to see. Marcus, I want you to listen very carefully. This is not a military operation. You are not under siege. You are on a class field trip to practice basic wilderness survival. I understand that, Professor, but with respect, basic wilderness survival includes threat assessment and defensive preparations. I mean, what if something had gone wrong? What if there were hostile forces in the area? You'd want us to be prepared, right? Zelak looked at the multiple camera feeds showing his students moving through the forest with military precision, using hand signals and maintaining formations that would make a Marine proud. Marcus, what hostile forces could there possibly be on a nature preserve? Well, that's exactly the kind of thinking that gets people killed, Professor. You always have to assume the worst-case scenario. What if there were poachers? What if some kind of territorial dispute spilled over? What if this whole thing was a test to see how we'd handle an actual crisis situation? The professor felt something that might have been an aneurysm starting behind his third eye. It's not a test. It's literally just camping. That's what they want us to think, Marcus replied, and somehow Zelak could hear the grin in his voice. On screen, the human was now briefing his fellow students around what appeared to be a sand table. A detailed topographical model of the surrounding area complete with marked positions, approach routes, and what looked suspiciously like tactical symbols. As you can see, Marcus was saying to his captive audience, we've got excellent sight lines from positions Alpha through Delta. The creek provides a natural obstacle on our eastern flank, and the cliff face gives us security to the west. Our main concern is this ridgeline to the north. It's the obvious approach for any hostile force. Nala raised a tentative hand. Marcus, I hate to interrupt, but what hostile force? This is a wildlife preserve. The most aggressive thing here is a berry-eating rodent. Exactly the kind of complacency that gets squads wiped out, Marcus replied, seriously. You never know what you're going to face out here. Better to be overprepared than dead. Yathin, who had been quietly enjoying the entire spectacle, chimed in with his melodious, crystalline voice. I have to admit, this is far more engaging than the usual survival exercise. At least we're learning practical skills. Practical skills. Zelak sputtered over the comm. This is not practical. This is paranoid delusion. With respect, Professor, Marcus replied. Paranoia is just situational awareness taken to its logical conclusion. And speaking of which, we've detected some unusual movement patterns in Sector 7. I'm recommending we send out a reconnaissance patrol. The movement patterns are probably wildlife. Probably, but probably gets people killed. Hex Dex, you're up. Standard recon pattern, radio check every 15 minutes, and if you see anything unusual, you fall back immediately and report. The two students, who had apparently embraced their new roles as scouts, gave what could only be described as military-style acknowledgments and melted into the forest with disturbing efficiency. Vrex looked up from his notes. Professor, I have to ask, where exactly did Marcus learn all this? That's what I'd like to know. Zelak opened Marcus's student file on his datapad. Let's see. Marcus Chen, human, age 22, studying xenobiology with a focus on ecosystem dynamics. Previous experience includes. His voice trailed off as he read. What is it? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. 3 years in something called the Earth Defense Forces. Specialization in what they call asymmetric warfare and small unit tactics. Zelak looked at the screen where Marcus was now constructing what appeared to be a ballista from local materials. He's not a student playing soldier. He's a soldier playing student. The communication system crackled again. Control, this is Base Camp Alpha. We've got eyes on 3 large quadrupeds approaching from the north. Request permission to engage. Those are probably just deer, Zelak shouted. Negative, Control. These are definitely not deer. Moving in formation, coordinated approach patterns, definitely showing hostile intent. Vrex pulled up the wildlife camera feeds and scrolled through until he found the northern perimeter. Professor, those are definitely deer. I can see that. They appear to be grazing. Marcus! Zelak barked into the comm. Do not engage the deer. Copy that, Control, maintaining observation. But I'm telling you, something's not right about their movement patterns. Too coordinated, too purposeful. On screen, 3 utterly normal deer were doing utterly normal deer things. Eating grass, occasionally looking up to check for predators, and existing in the least threatening way possible. Oh, for the love of... Zelak started, then caught himself. Marcus, those are herbivores. They eat plants. They are not a threat. That's what they want us to think. Marcus replied with the kind of certainty usually reserved for religious fanatics. Never trust anything that approaches your perimeter, regardless of apparent intent. One of the deer looked up at that moment, made eye contact with a hidden camera, and went back to eating. It was possibly the least threatening thing Zelak had ever seen. This is insane, he muttered. Actually, Vrex said thoughtfully, from a purely academic standpoint, it's fascinating. Human military doctrine appears to emphasize overwhelming preparation for unlikely scenarios. It's inefficient from a resource standpoint, but it certainly ensures survival in worst-case situations. We're not in a worst-case situation. We're in a best-case situation. Perfect weather, abundant resources, no predators, no hazards. This should be the most relaxing 3 days in the galaxy. The comm crackled. Control. Base Camp Alpha reporting. The quadrupeds have moved off, but we're maintaining elevated alert status. Also, I've completed construction on our secondary defensive positions. We can now provide covering fire for the entire perimeter from multiple angles. Zelak looked at the screen. Marcus had indeed constructed what appeared to be a series of fighting positions, complete with overhead cover and interlocking fields of fire. His fellow students were now manning these positions with makeshift weapons that looked alarmingly effective. How did he even know how to build those? Zelak wondered aloud. Standard field fortification techniques, Marcus answered, apparently having heard the question. You start with your primary position, then establish secondary positions that can cover each other. Add some overhead protection against indirect fire, clear your sight lines, and make sure you've got good communication between positions. Indirect fire? We're not going to be shelled. Better safe than sorry, Professor. You can never be too prepared. At that moment, Hex's voice came over the radio. Base Camp Alpha, this is Scout 1. I've got movement in Sector 4. Large, definitely not quadrupeds. Everyone in the observation shuttle froze. Zelak frantically switched camera feeds until he found Sector 4. Oh, come on, he breathed. Lumbering through the forest was a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a very large, very confused sloth. It was absolutely massive, covered in shaggy brown fur, and was currently engaged in the threatening activity of eating berries off a bush. Control. Marcus's voice was crisp and professional. We have visual confirmation of a large hostile in Sector 4. Appears to be some kind of Ursine variant, requesting immediate extraction for non-combat personnel. It's a fluff bear! Zelak practically screamed. They're herbivores. They're called fluff bears because they're fluffy and harmless. Negative control. Anything that size represents a significant threat to personnel. We're implementing lockdown procedures and preparing defensive measures. The fluff bear, completely oblivious to having been designated a threat, continued its berries and sunshine existence while Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. All stations, condition red. Large hostile moving through Sector 4. Prepare for possible contact. Zelak watched in horror as his students took up positions behind their improvised fortifications. The fluff bear, meanwhile, had found a particularly interesting berry bush and was making happy snuffling sounds. This is not happening, Zelak muttered. This cannot be happening. Control. Recommend immediate airstrike on the hostile's position, Marcus suggested helpfully. We are not conducting an airstrike on a fluff bear. Alternative solution. I've got a clear shot with the ballista. One projectile should be sufficient to neutralize the threat. Do not shoot the fluff bear. Copy that, but if it moves on the perimeter, we're going to have to engage. The fluff bear, having exhausted the berry supply on its current bush, began ambling toward another one. Unfortunately, this brought it approximately 30 meters closer to the camp perimeter. Contact! Contact! Marcus shouted. Hostile moving on our position. All stations prepare to repel boarders. It's looking for more berries. Zelak screamed into the comm, but it was too late. The camp had erupted into perfectly coordinated chaos. Students took up defensive positions with military precision while the fluff bear continued its slow-motion berry quest, completely unaware that it had been designated public enemy number 1. Taking the shot, Marcus announced. No! The ballista fired with a sound like a tree branch snapping. The improvised projectile, a sharpened stick about the size of a small spear, sailed through the air in a perfect arc and embedded itself in the ground approximately 3 meters in front of the fluff bear. The creature looked at the stick with mild curiosity, sniffed it once, decided it wasn't edible, and went back to its berries. Miss, Marcus reported calmly. Reloading. Stop shooting at it, Zelak pleaded. Professor, with respect, that thing weighs at least 300 kilos. If it charges our position, our defensive perimeter won't hold. The fluff bear, having found a berry bush that met its exacting standards, settled down for what appeared to be an extended snacking session. It looked about as likely to charge anything as a particularly lazy sofa. It's not going to charge. It's eating berries. That's what they do. Behavioral patterns can change without warning, Marcus replied, apparently quoting from some manual. Large mammals are unpredictable and should always be treated as hostile until proven otherwise. It's proven otherwise. It's been proving otherwise for the last 10 minutes. Vrex, who had been quietly observing the entire spectacle, cleared his throat. Professor, perhaps we should consider early extraction, you think? Base Camp Alpha, this is Control, Zelak said into the comm. Maintain current positions, but do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not engage the local wildlife. Extraction will commence in 30 minutes. Copy that, Control, but I recommend we maintain elevated security protocols until pickup. That hostile is still in the area, and there could be others. Zelak looked at the screen, where the fluff bear was now lying on its back, paws in the air, taking what appeared to be a post-snack nap in the afternoon sun. Yes, Marcus, I'm sure it's plotting something. That's exactly the kind of complacency that gets people killed. Yes, I know. Zelak rubbed his temples again. Just maintain positions and try not to declare war on anything else before we get there. Understood, Control. But I'm keeping the ballista trained on the hostiles' position. Of course you are. The next 30 minutes passed with Marcus providing a running commentary on the tactical situation, which apparently consisted of the fluff bear sleeping, 3 birds doing bird things, and a small rodent that Marcus designated as a potential infiltrator, until it scampered up a tree and disappeared. When the extraction shuttle finally arrived, Zelak was amazed to see his students emerge from positions he hadn't even known existed. They'd somehow managed to camouflage their defensive work so well that from the air, the site looked like pristine wilderness. Only when they began dismantling their fortifications did the true scope of Marcus's engineering become apparent. "How did you even build all this in 3 days?" Zelak asked as he watched students emerge from spider holes and concealed positions like some kind of woodland special forces unit. "Efficient resource utilization and proper task management," Marcus replied, shouldering a pack that looked like it belonged in a military surplus store. "Plus, everyone really stepped up once they understood the tactical situation." "What tactical situation?" Zelak demanded. "There was no tactical situation." Marcus gestured toward the sleeping fluff bear. "Tell that to our furry friend over there. It's sleeping." Tactical patience. Classic predator behavior. Zelak gave up. Some battles, he realized, could not be won through logic or reason. Some battles could only be survived. As the students filed onto the extraction shuttle, chattering excitedly about their deployment and already planning improvements for next time, Vrex leaned over to his professor. "You know," he said quietly, "their survival rate would have been 100%. It was already 100%. It's a nature preserve." Yes, but they didn't know that. From their perspective, they successfully defended their position against all threats for 3 days. Zelak looked out the shuttle window at the dismantled camp. Nothing remained except some scuffed earth and a few cut branches. Even Marcus's elaborate defensive works had been completely erased, as if they'd never existed. "At least tell me he won't do this again," Zelak pleaded. Marcus, overhearing from across the shuttle, grinned. "Actually, Professor, I was thinking for the next exercise we could work on mobile operations. You know, establish a base camp, then conduct reconnaissance in force to map the entire area. Maybe set up some forward operating bases, practice field communication, work on our small unit tactics." Zelak's head hit the shuttle wall with a soft thunk. "Or," Marcus continued cheerfully, "if you really want to make it interesting, we could try a live fire exercise. I've got some ideas for constructing proper training weapons from local materials." The fluff bear, far below, rolled over in its sleep and continued dreaming whatever dreams fluff bears dream, blissfully unaware that it had just survived first contact with humanity's approach to outdoor education. And somewhere in the back of the shuttle, Yathan was quietly taking notes for next semester's Advanced Wilderness Survival course, which would probably require significantly more paperwork and possibly some kind of hazard pay. Because if there was one thing the galaxy was learning about humans, it was this. Give them a simple task, and they'd find a way to turn it into a military campaign. Tell them to secure the camp, and they'd build something that could withstand a siege. It wasn't particularly practical, it wasn't always necessary, and it definitely wasn't what the instructor had in mind. But by every metric that mattered, it worked.